I think by far and away the biggest problem the world faces is animal agriculture when it comes to farming. It's by far and away the component of farming that is most damaging.
Yeah.
In terms of land use, the great majority of land is devoted to growing food for livestock rather than directly for humans. When you use arable land for that purpose, it's extremely wasteful because the crops which we could eat instead have to be passed through another animal, and you lose most of the nutritional value in doing so. Um, on pasture, it's even worse because you need so much land to produce a given amount of food. And as a result of that, and various other impacts it has, and this people find it really shocking when I say this, but sorry, this is what the science shows. The most damaging of all farm products is organic pasture-fed beef and lamb. Those are the worst possible things to eat. And all these foodies and celebrity chefs and said, oh, eat organic pasture-fed beef and lamb. And actually, no, that is the most terrible thing you can do. And if everybody tried to do that, if that became a sort of generalized product that everybody ate, well, we'd need several planets and there'd be no space for wild ecosystems at all. So we urgently need substitutes for animal products. And so far they haven't been so great. A lot of the plant substitutes are a bit disappointing, but like the cavalry, in the nick of time, we've got this whole new approach being developed and is very close now to commercialization. It's called precision fermentation, which is basically an advanced form of brewing up microbes to produce a very protein-rich flour, about 65% protein, 30% fat or so.
Our like bread flour.
Yeah. I went to see this, the work of this company, Solar Foods in Helsinki, where the flour which comes out at the end it sort of feels like bread flour, but it's a sort of golden yellow color because it's got beta carotene in, but it's very, very high in protein. In fact, I asked them to make me a pancake. I wanted to be the first person outside the lab to eat a pancake made from it, small flip for man. But in order to make that pancake, we had to dilute it with wheat flour, because normally, start with your wheat flour, you add your protein and fat, right, to raise the level. But if we'd just cooked with this flour, we would have made an omelette rather than a pancake. And it tasted just like a pancake. I mean, it was delicious. It was great. But you can use it to make almost anything far more easily than you can from plant compounds, with far less processing, far less extra ingredients and the rest of it, but also not just to substitute what we've already got, but to make a whole range of protein-rich stuff, which we can't even conceive of any more than the first people to domesticate a wild cow were thinking about camembert, right? Is this potential enormous revolution in our cuisine, but with a tiny fraction of the land area, a tiny fraction of the water use, a tiny fraction of the fertilizer use. These bacteria in Helsinki, they feed on hydrogen. That's the food. That's their food source. That's the feedstock going into the process. Is hydrogen, which is produced by this company from solar power, electrolysis of water, and they use the hydrogen in a similar way that a plant uses sunlight, except it's a far more efficient process than photosynthesis. And so and the other amazing thing about this is you could do it anywhere in the world. There's a lot of countries now which are really struggling because they're highly import dependent. They don't have enough fertile land. They don't have enough water to feed their own people. They often aren't rich. And so buying food on the international market is very expensive, but it's also becoming more and more fragile, those trading chains. And they're at the end of the chain with soft currencies, waiting for the ship to arrive. And it's getting more and more tenuous, and already this year, because of really the blockage of just one route, which is the grain coming out of Ukraine, we're seeing a massive exacerbation of starvation. Had that coincided, incidentally, with that container ship getting stuck across the Suez Canal last year, those two things had come together, then it would have been much, much worse. Shelves would have just emptied like that because two major shipping routes were just shut off. And so so this enables people who've got lots of sunlight but not much else, and sunlight is what you need if you want to make hydrogen through solar power. It enables them to have this completely autonomous food production, even in places which are really hostile to farming.
Yeah.
So I think we can, we could very quickly get good substitutes for animal products, and not just animal products, but also for soy, for palm oil, for
Yeah.
coconut, for a lot of the really damaging plant products that we grow, with a really, really tiny fraction of the environmental impact. And then to get to your question,
Yeah.
sorry, roundabout
That's
route,
right.
we could then rewild vast tracts of the planet's surface, huge
Mm.
areas which are now used particularly for pasture, because that's the great majority of the world's farmland is pasture. It's a tremendously wasteful way of producing food. Those could be used to allow the rainforests to come back, allow the savannas to come back, the wetlands and the rest of it. And not only could that stop the sixth great extinction and allow the revival of ecosystems, but it could also draw down a great deal of the carbon dioxide that we've already released
Mm.
into the atmosphere. Not all of it. I mean, we also need urgently to decarbonize our own economies, but
Yeah.
we know that even if we do that almost instantly, the overshoot will still commit us to certainly 1.5 and probably 2 degrees of global heating, which is a disastrous level.
Mm.
And if we want to stop that, we have to draw down some of the CO2 we've already released as well. And by far, the cheapest, the most effective, and the most benign way of doing that is the restoration of ecosystems.
Yeah. It's not as sexy as getting people to Mars, is it? I guess that's the
No, but
problem.
it's so much
It's more
more important
important.
and
Yeah.
cheaper. And and the thing is that you're solving a whole lot of problems all at once. And
Yeah.
this is why I think that this relatively simple technology, precision fermentation, it was developed by NASA in the 1960s, but it's not rocket science. It is
No.
basically just a sort of a fancy form of brewing. Why I think it is the most important environmental technology ever developed.
Wow.
And we should, I mean, there are dangers. There's dangers of corporate concentration, just like in the rest of the food chain at the moment. And so we should get in there and say, we want this to be distributed. We want this to be owned by the people in general. It should be open source.
Yeah.
Small and medium businesses can use it, and the rest of it, there could be a microbrewery on the edge of every town,
Yeah.
producing products designed for the local market. That would be fantastic. But we've got to demand that, and instead of just saying, "Oh, we don't like the technology; it's new, it's microbes,"
Yeah.
rather than saying, "Yeah, let's make sure this technology works for us,"
Yeah.
and we should be getting behind it, but with those caveats that it's got to belong to the people.
Yeah, for sure. I think as long as they can get like Heston Blumenthal on
Mm.
top of like product design, I think they'd have a pretty good chance. Uh,
Yeah, I mean that's what we need. We need those
Need
those
someone.
creators, those innovative chefs, yeah, to come
Yeah.
along and say what can you do with this, and I mean you could do so much with it, because basically, so what humans want more than anything is protein.
Yeah.
And when you've got this incredibly protein rich flour, which even as it comes off the roller, it smells like scrambled egg. It smells really tasty, really rich,
Mm.
because we're really drawn to protein. We've got this big
Yeah.
attraction to it, and so from that, I mean, there's almost nothing you can't make. It's not difficult, and you've got this sort of really concentrated source of protein.
I think it's quite promising then in
Mm.
that sense, especially with that technology.